One day there will be peace. One day there will be another way. But for now, I have death threats. Say all your death threats, they lie about me. They cry into me. They hide from me. They see what I possess. They hide away. For now, I told you they were following you. I told you they were after you. Because you tell the truth. Because your voice is heard. You want a better world. They are your death threat, death threat, death threat. They are your death threat, death threat, death threat. They are your death threat, death threat, death They lie about me. They pry into me. They hide from me. They seek what I possess. They slide away.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Porthole to Justice, the window to the truth. I am your host, Amelia.
Greetings.
Whoops.
Well,
that was Zeph Daniel music, Trish Daniel on vocals, and that's Death Threat, available on iTunes. It is December 3rd, 2018. I'm your host, Amelia Duran. And today I'm having on, my guest is a photojournalist. Her name is Sahar Chinyere, and she testified before the Senate Judiciary Committee regarding the targeting and immunity trafficking and some of the just a lot of the actual terrorizing and targeting and grooming that goes on on some of these campuses to actually sort of traumatize and prepare, organized. It's an ongoing connection between organized sexual predation and the now epidemic proportions of sexual assaults on campuses. So we're going to be talking about that today. So stand by. Let me get her on.
Amelia.
Hi, welcome to the Porthole to Justice. We're live.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so I was just explaining to everybody a little bit about you. You're a photojournalist, and you actually testified before the U.S. Senate Committee regarding some of the targeting and immunity trafficking, and you talked about some of this organized gang stalking or targeting that goes on the campuses and sexual, ongoing sexual assaults, things of that nature.
Okay, well, I want to clarify one thing that you said there. What happened was in 2014, the United States Senate Judiciary Committee, I think it was because of some kinds of federal guidelines that they have in place for these types of investigations, they made a public announcement that they were looking into the epidemic of sexual assaults on college campuses in particular. They said on campuses, and I think they were specifically talking about like college campuses as opposed to necessarily military bases, although I really think they need to look into that as well, and cult compounds. Those are the three kinds of analogous environments I've identified where this is a bigger problem. And so they invited I think they actually have a federal mandate when they do something like that. They have to invite the public to be able to submit testimony. So they did not invite me specifically, and I did not get to speak with anyone live, but I got in touch with them and I found out the contact information and the deadlines and so forth. And there was a maximum number of pages, which was 10, that you could submit of main body, things like that. And I did a written testimony that I submitted to them in December of 2014. And that's linked from the summary of Snow Yoke concerns on Facebook.com/SNOEOAWC. It stands for Stop Non-Consensual Experiments on All World Citizens. And basically a reason it's called that, because some people, when they understand how much I'm focused on human trafficking, epidemic, and sexual assaults, they don't really understand where the experimentation comes in. It's because I've been focusing on how they deliberately traumatize their targets. It seems like their favorite tactic for that is with sexual assaults, even from as young of targets as children, and basically as young as these organized predators can get their hands on, and that they're using those sexual assaults as their tactic to traumatize the target, to prime them to be in a most receptive state for the organized predators' brainwashing and programming. And then that brainwashing and programming is not just for its own sake, because a lot of people, even experiencing it, think that maybe they just do it to do it. They do it primarily, it seems, from my investigation, experience, and research, they do it for their human enslavement and human trafficking purposes. Mm-hmm. And they can be so covert that even the people they're doing it to, even though they're they can be very, very smart, they can be doctors, lawyers, etc., but they don't understand that that's what's happened to them. They don't realize that the same people that they're now working for are people that arranged for them to be abused since they were children, things like that, all the maneuvering to get them to basically where, when they give them the quote choice, it's already been set up that they don't really have a choice. That's basically how they operate, very covertly with organized crime.
Wow. I mean, we know, I know that they actually target and gang stalk, and the objective is human trafficking. That seems to be the objective, as well as targeting to get people into courts and, liquidate them through those means as well. Yeah. But you were talking about the grooming, specifically the grooming that goes on these campuses, and just how bad the epidemic is.
Okay, well, I'm actually somebody who was targeted that way in my first year of college. Mm-hmm. There were a lot of sophisticated layers to what happened to me. And so I basically, from when I was even younger than that, I remember at 6 years old, which is basically when my memories start, because I have two very brief events that I'm actually not even 100% confident about, because it's just two brief things. Like one thing, I remember playing with my grandmother's dogs, and I wonder, if that was kind of put into my mind as a memory, if I really experienced that memory. So it was so short. So it was the other thing. Otherwise, I really don't remember my life before I was 6 years old, and I was lied to basically my whole life that was normal, and then I found out it was not. But there were other strange things going on, and I started basically having that inner voice tell me, it's important that you need to figure out what, this is a puzzle of what's going on here. It's not random. It's not by accident. It's not bad luck. It's by design, by orchestration. You need to figure out, remember everything as best as you can so you can put, it's like puzzle pieces and put them together. And so I'm not terribly proud to say that because I'm in my late 40s now, so only very recently, once I actually got into my 40s, did I feel like I have, a critical mass of the puzzle pieces. And only it was a little bit over 11 years ago, I started regularly publicly addressing these concerns, and I was still really didn't feel like I had a critical mass of the whole overview of the overall puzzle, but I felt like I had enough concerns that enough people had internationally, including being targeted to end up in court with regard to real estate racketeering against me. So there was a real estate racketeering in Colorado, and I thought, I realized there were organized criminals involved at that level, and I thought it was limited to that. That's really when I started publicly posting a lot and talking with other people who were experiencing the same thing, and these people were not getting fair opportunities in court. And then I found out, unfortunately, very scarily, that was not the extent of it. That was a part of it, and I'm sure they were happy to get the, the assets, the money, everything they could get by doing that kind of activity, but they kept on after me. And I'm somebody this helped me to realize part of what was going on, because some people think there's some kind of vendetta or something, that's the motive for this stuff. And maybe sometimes it is, but I don't really know of any case where it actually is. I knew that basically nobody had that kind of motivation, because I'm very nice to people and stuff. And even the person that raped me in my first year of college, he gave me a puzzle piece because he felt so bad about it. He was saying his parents made him do it. And I actually thought that was I just didn't think that could possibly be even remotely true. I thought it was just somebody trying to not take responsibility for what they did. But I guess what I'm saying is that even, if I had to think hard, if somebody was trying to, just hurt me, I would tend to think toward him, except that, that wasn't the type of energy he had toward me either. Really, he was assigned and he felt bad about it. And I ended up learning, when I kept getting targeted by these organized criminals, that which I still am now. It's over 30 years after that. The part of the targeting is they arrange for you to be sexually assaulted, and they do seem to like to do it. I think there's a higher percentage in that first year of college, and I think might be partly the age. I've experienced surges of this in and around every sixth year. So ages 5 to 7, although I don't remember age 5 so well, but I remember coming out of my sixth year into age 7 also. I remember a big flare up where I started getting a lot of documentation in and around 2007. That's the year I turned 36. Mm-hmm. So every multiple of 6 age and the year leading into it and the year coming out of it, it's been a real surge. And I think, there seems to be a connection with satanic ritual abuse. The person who was assigned to rape me was the head of a semi-secret society on campus that was Luciferian, at least, if not satanic. And they called him Beelzebub. And so I think this issue of also being targeted, having to be extra careful in and around age 18, first year of college and so forth, is also connected.
Wow. Interesting. I had mentioned, you mentioned this program, and you recall you recall some of the activities starting when you were very, very young. What do you recall? What would you say? I know personally for myself, I know that I think my parents put me in the program when I was 4, I think. And I know that there was drugging and sleeping, go to sleep, go on trips, things like that. I remember that,
Oh, I can relate to that. I believe that, and I remember things like that as well.
Wow. And then, the rape and all of that. Wow. That's just, I'm so sorry. That's terrible. So so this happened on campus. and what happened after that?
Okay, and I want to, I'm sorry, I forgot to mention, this is just to keep in the back of your mind if at any time you'd like to ask me, the photos I sent you, it occurred to me if we're trying to figure out, next section of something to focus on, feel free to ask me about any of these photographs, and I could read the description on it and or elaborate on that or answer any questions about that, because I realize that's those visuals are already made. And those are all.
You had made a clip. You had made a clip about the military.
Audio. Okay.
Audio.
I think I know. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. There was in that surge in and around 2007. Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. I'm going to try to remember to answer. You actually have two questions outstanding. I try to be good about this, so I'm going to try to answer both. Let's see. In and around 2007, definitely including all of 2007, but it started being heavily so from 2006, the targeting, and then into 2008. And that was 2007 is when I turned 36. Mm-hmm. And that's when I started becoming a lot more public and posting, wow, there's organized criminals targeting me. I really don't know why, but clearly they're, and they're after, the house, their home equity, they're after this, they're after that. And then that was going on in Colorado. And then there was a doctor who was involved. I mentioned him to you, and I promised to be careful not to say whole names, so I was going to just use the last initial, Dr. S. Mm-hmm. I did refer to him more fully in that December 2014 written testimony I submitted to the U.S. Senate Judiciary Committee. He turned out to be a doctor that was connected to some of these people that were dragging me in to have to deal with court matters because of real estate racketeering. And it was all very strange how the way they were communicating with each other, and he was interfering with my medical care, and he had never been my doctor. What I found out was that, I never went to any medical visit where he was the doctor, so it was really all very strange because his name kept coming up as somebody who was interfering with my health care some way or the other. And I actually had a person who was a doctor of mine in endocrinology ask me, because my thyroid was going out of control, so that's when I needed to see an endocrinologist, and she asked me, do you know who that is? Because I had an appointment. And she was immediately, before she could really sit down and talk with me, she was called away from the appointment. And then this man came, and he was lurking right outside her office inside the hospital. It was a University of Colorado hospital and in Aurora. And that was a former military base location. They used to call it at Fitzsimmons. And it still had this leftover, military medical personnel, including him. Mm-hmm. And so he's the head of that group of physicians, and it's University Physicians Incorporated. And basically they supply all the doctors to all the University of Colorado hospitals, and they supply the doctors to all the Denver Health hospitals. They used to be called Denver General Hospitals. And so there's a military connection there. Among other things, I found that he was connected to more than one non-consensual human experiment that I put the information in the written testimony, but I can say that they include the Tuskegee syphilis experiment. He's no longer alive. He was older. I believe he was in his 70s when he died and when this was happening. The Tuskegee syphilis experiment was documented to have happened from 32 to 72, those 40 years. And in that time, he was high up in the office that was carrying that out. That was the United States Public Health Service. And basically they were, that's probably the most famously known non-consensual human experiment in the States. Mm-hmm. It's not necessarily the worst, even though it was really bad, but it's the most well-known. And so they were allowing the people that had syphilis they were preventing them from getting a diagnosis. They were allowing them to deteriorate because they wanted to document the deterioration. And so they were actively following them around. They would prevent any doctor from actually telling them, oh, you have syphilis, because then the next step would be, well, here's penicillin, because penicillin was known to be able to knock out the syphilis. But they instead did not want them to have that chance. They wanted to document the deterioration. So some of the doctors I've spoken to told me that they suspected they might have even, because it was a targeted population of African Americans, primarily, most directly African American males, but of course indirectly it would have affected their sexual partners and their potentially their children, their families, and all as well. But they, I was told that by some of the doctors that are knowledgeable of them, that they are suspicious that these people were not just neglected in that regard so that the deterioration could be documented, but that they were actually infected to begin with deliberately. Now, I have not come across any documentation as of yet that has happened there. However, I found out that also these same overlapping groups of semi-secret society medical professionals, because I did find out, I have a recording on my YouTube channel of a doctor that was in their network acknowledging that there is such a network. There is a semi-secret or secret society. To me, I now call them semi-secret, but I guess to most people, secret society of medical doctors, a medical and scientific semi-secret society. And so they apparently have a lot to do. They have a lot to do with these non-consensual human experimentations. And so unfortunately, that what they call the Guatemala syphilis experiment, that was carried out by overlapping parties. Mm-hmm. It was also carried out, of course, by some facilitating entities out of Guatemala, and so some facilitating personnel there. So really some corrupt parties from within there, even though they ended up suing the United States over it, because apparently it was largely carried out through the United States Public Health Service. And then in that, there is documentation that they deliberately had subjects infected with syphilis. So they didn't just, find people that happened to have gotten infected. They went and they actively infected people as well. So that's a higher, a more clear extent of deliberetely targeting people to undermine their health. And then there was a more modern non-consensual human experiment. It's by Northfield Labs, a Department of Defense contractor. And I found that to be also a commonality. A lot of Department of defense contracts that are relatively covert, that are overlapping with the non-consensual experimentations. And so basically they were testing out, they might still be doing it, they were testing out at least into 2006 with the same group of doctors and facilities in Colorado and other facilities around the United States, at least, maybe other countries as well, the artificial blood. And the idea behind it is actually potentially a decent humanitarian idea. It's the way they're carrying it out that's a problem. So their idea is that they're concerned, especially in certain contexts, like out in war zones, soldiers that are in need of, say blood, get an infusion and so forth. They've lost too much blood. They need blood right away, and they need to know it's not contaminated with like a disease or something. Then they have this idea, if they could develop this artificial blood that would be safe for them to use, they could have that, in their inventory, and they could bring it out and use it as they need on an emergency basis. The problem is in places where they were carrying out the non-consensual experimentation to see how it works, they would basically do that. They would just, grab people that are in a condition where they on an emergency basis, they need blood. And in that situation, they're also not in a condition to agree or not agree as to what blood they're going to get right at that time. And they were being used as guinea pigs to see, how it would work. And when it came out in the ABC News report in 2006, it was at that time at least detrimental. It was not as healthful as non-diseased real blood. Mm-hmm. So then you asked me a question about, so that doctor, he had been in the U.S. Army Medical Corps. So he had that medical and military background. And then when I tried to get away from it and I moved, I hadn't been there for quite some time because I've been a permanent resident of the States, legal permanent resident since the 1980s when I was a teenager. But I was so being, stalked and things like that, interfered with by organized criminals, that basically all my people that I was in touch with that were concerned about my safety and my health said, try moving back to Canada. Maybe you could get away from these people if you do that. So I tried that. I actually moved back on Christmas Day in 2006, and I was there. I didn't even finish. I was only there a matter of months. By the end of 2007, I'd come back. And so what happened is that literally within 3 days, I heard somebody talking, and he was making reference to the Canadian consulate and to Colorado and things like that. And he made reference to a United States senator, to Senator Boxer, not with regard to any corruption on her part, but they were concerned. And then I did some digging. I found out she and U.S. Representative Henry Waxman had commissioned a June 2005 report on a non-consensual human experimentation called the Human Pesticide Experiments Report. So I started paying attention. I started recording what I heard going on because they moved him into a nearby apartment on the same floor within 3 days of shepherding me to that apartment. And they referred to him as their, quote, audio engineering consultant. And apparently he was an audio engineering consultant, but he also, was doing any number of other things because it's organized criminal, non-consensual human experimentation and trafficking activities. And so in one of the recordings, and that set is up on my YouTube channel it's a set from middle of 2007 in downtown Toronto. And he said, these are business partners, Navy people. Mm-hmm. And that's the clip that you're referring to. And I know I've said like a lot, but I just want to remember, you asked me one other question I didn't quite answer. So I'm going to go back to that, and then I'll take a break, give you a chance to ask me anything you want. You asked me about the targeting that I first remember, like when I was 6 years old. Well, long story short, I'm going to pick out one thing that connects to the other things I just said. I was having some interesting medical things happening that I was already suspicious of, even at that age, and now I only have more reason to check into it, but I cannot swear 100% that was part of the targeting. But I actually have a corneal transplant from when I was 6 years old in my left eye, and I don't know any legitimate reason why they did this, so they seem to have done that as far as related. I'm really and they're very strange. Every time I've gone into an ophthalmology person that's really inspected that eye, they typically will call their medical students. They'll literally call in like half a dozen medical students. Oh, come see this and this and that. They'll call people like that, and they'll be like gawking at my, eye surgery, the corneal transplant, and they whisper amongst themselves. They won't answer all my questions about what is so interesting. And then, I also was told it set medical history, world medical history, that I was like the youngest person. The first time they did a corneal transplant on a child, and this and that. And then I found out that the doctor who did it, in addition to some other interesting things, now he was only ever nice to me, so I do want to say that, like in his bedside manner and all, he was actually nice to me. But unlike the doctor that my endocrinologist asked me about, he really creeped me out, and he creeped her out. She asked me, like, do you know who that is? I did not know who he was, because he was not somebody I visited as a doctor of mine, but it caused me to find out who he was and realize that there was this non-consensual human experimentation concern and organized criminal activities concern. But the doctor that did my eye surgery, he had been based in Los Angeles, and he actually relocated to Canada, to Toronto, to be primarily to keep being my eye doctor. And so for a long time, I never saw any other eye doctor. And any time that I have seen any other eye doctor, they seem to be very, I realized there was a they that was being very specific about which doctor they would let me see. And they bring other people in to come watch also and see and stuff. And they whisper about things. They won't tell me everything they're talking about. And so I think that it might have not just been like a transplant, but like to implant something to help with, because they have really extreme surveillance on me all the time. And it seems like between potentially things like that, like surgery going back to when I was 6, and then the injection in my arm, I sent you the photo of the suspicious injection in my arm by the Canadian counterpart of that doctor that was based in Colorado, that I also wrote about in that paper. They did a suspicious injection, and simultaneously, when I went back to residence for the rest of that year, the time I spent that year in Canada, they had suddenly were popping up radio frequency identification transponders all around me, and I would never get a straight answer when I tried asking security guards and so forth, why are these transponders suddenly popping up around here in the building? And they'd get very nervous. They wouldn't give me a straight answers. The ones that seemed to know anything about it, some of them really seemed to not know about it. And then I was photographing them. I started posting pictures of them, and they basically disappeared them. As mysteriously as they had caused them to appear, they mysteriously and immediately caused them to disappear. But there have continued to be like no time lapse when I go anywhere where I can see disproportionate vehicles from Maryland, which is where I was targeted on the State University campus by somebody who also, his father has done research on pulsed signals buried in noise. That's been his focus, and that's been overtly through the Navy, more covertly seems to have connections with DARPA, because I found that online, and before I was taking more precautions, before I realized how much I was being surveilled live in my computer activity, I had found that his research was DARPA connected, and then I was getting ready to get it printed out and screenshotted and stuff like that, and they disappeared it. So I haven't found it online since then, but overtly he's done it through the United States Navy. So I think that also seems to be related to when, years later, the audio engineering consultant is complaining to somebody in his faction, these are business partners, Navy people.
You talk about in your report about these Vera chips and RFID chips, and requesting the Senate Judiciary Committee to actually help these victims that are being tracked and stalked using this technology. Excellent report, by the way.
Oh, thank you. I don't want to take full credit for that, the excellent write-up requesting the help, that part. He was very expert at how he did it. It's only a couple of short paragraphs. I'm going to look for it to read it, because it was by Representative Jim Guest of Missouri. He's retired now. He served the maximum number of terms, he was allowed to serve, and I don't remember if it was 2 or 3 terms for Missouri state legislature, and then he retired, and he had been an aerospace engineer. So he was not just like a politician. He had the background to understand this kind of technology. And so he wrote the letter about the, let me see here. Sorry, I'm going to pull it up real quick. He wrote the letter asking for help. And he had also told me when I talked with him, because I wanted to say this will help people understand how much they interfere communications-wise, including mass-scale communications. He wrote this excellent letter, and so they didn't want the people to be really paying attention to the concerns he was talking about here, and so they started spreading around a fraudulent version of his letter. So to undermine the real letter. So I was very careful to ask him, to confirm that the copy I had, first of all, was the real letter. And I also talked with him about the fact that, these organized predators went so far that they had distributed a false version of his letter to try to undermine the real letter. But as the last I saw, that was pretty well squashed. They kind of got a little bit of a splash out of it, but it, now I've only, in more recent searches, I only see the real letter. And it was October 10th. Actually, that same year, they were surging things badly against me in 2007. And he had gotten U.S. Senator Ted Kennedy was going to help him to get new congressional inquiry into these matters, but unfortunately then the Senator Kennedy, he came down with the aggressive brain tumor and he died. And I am suspicious of that because these people are basically doing non-consensual testing of neurological weapons, and I'm wondering if that might have had something to do with, very conconveniently for them causing that problem, health problem, fatally.
You and I have we realize that we both have the same health problem, which is the thyroid.
Yes, the thyroid. That's another one. In fact, I don't want to pinpoint it too much because I don't want to break the confidentiality of the particular person, but I will say that one of the reasons that Representative Guest was so concerned about this is that he did know somebody quite closely that also was being targeted this way and also had her thyroid get out of control and have problems getting it diagnosed and treated, properly, instead of people acting more weird about it every time, she has to go see the doctor about the thyroid being out of balance. So, and like I said, he has a background. He was an aerospace engineer. He has a very solid scientific background. And so he wrote this letter. It says, "Dear member of the legislature and friends, this letter is to ask for your help for the many constituents in our country who are being affected unjustly by electronic weapons torture and covert harassment groups. Serious privacy rights violations and physical injuries have been caused by the activities of these groups and their use of so-called non-lethal weapons on men, women, and even children. I am asking you to play a role in helping these victims and also stopping the massive movement in the use of Verichip and RFID technologies in tracking Americans." And I'll note again real quick, the RFID stands for radio frequency identification. So long before Verichip was known, we were testing these devices on Americans, many without their knowledge or consent. With the new revelations of the cancer risk, besides the privacy and human rights problems with the use of Verichip and RF signals, again, radio frequency signals, I am asking you for help in stopping these abuses and aiding those already affected. And then the rest is about, it's kind of stale dated because the rest is about inviting people to attend a conference call that was from 2007.
Mm-hmm. I knew, I think I had asked you, I digress. You filed an FBI report due to your rape, your on-campus rape. Did they investigate or respond?
No. And I'm not too hard to find, especially for, somebody working for the FBI, because I'm not actually trying to hide. Mm-hmm. So, but I have had my communications interfered with. I've had signs of that right up to this day, so that my communications get interfered with live in real time, and including phone calls. Like, it doesn't have to be text typing based or email based. It can be like literally I've tried to make a phone call more than once that I end up speaking to someone that I end up finding out was not even the person. So they totally, I don't know if the right word is spoofed the call, not just a phone number, but they'll divert the call. I press the right number, but they hijack that call. They send it to whoever, somebody amongst themselves. They pretend to be, if they know I'm trying to call, I was in fact trying to call somebody, a bioethics professional that I had previously interviewed, and they did this then. And this person sounded not anything like the man I had interviewed, who was an educated professional PhD person, right? A bioethics professional. I was trying to reach him, and they hijacked my call to somebody who basically sounded like a gangbanger, with maybe high school education. And I was like, so these are the kinds of things that have gone on. So I will say that yet. So I do wonder, did anybody from the FBI ever try to follow up with me? I can't swear 100% they did not. But at least if they did, they haven't tried very hard, because to my knowledge, they have not followed up on it. And basically, I submitted that in July 28th of last year, 2017. And it's because, again, actually, when I was sexually assaulted, it was now, I was 18. So we're talking 3 decades ago. So it wasn't really that spurred me to file the complaint. It was that, and you're welcome to ask me any particular question about any part. I sent you the screenshot, the front and back of the complaint I submitted to them. Basically, it's because I realized that sexual assault, which I included in the complaint, is connected to these ongoing organized criminal, organized predatory activities that these people seem to be after, wanting to keep at these kinds of activities that are, run a spectrum of being, targeting somebody's assets, their financially, and targeting their health and targeting their emotional well-being, so anywhere from, really potentially life-threatening, where sexual assault, and, very violent or, more on paper, preventing your calls from getting through to a lawyer's office when you're trying to reach the lawyer's office or a bioethics professional. They send it to themselves and they try to pretend to be that person. So they're very, all the things, even I did not know these things happen, like, especially to this, this extent as far as the frequency of occurrence in real life. I'd seen these kinds of things happen on television, but that's all these things that you can cook up, to scam somebody and so forth. That's the kind of thing that these people have been doing.
It's not uncommon, that they don't really respond in these investigations. The FBI, I hear it all the time, unfortunately. You talked a little bit about the grooming, for these children. I know that they actually, they will get perps from inside families, family members as well. But the grooming of these children so that they can actually train them for human traffickers. Can you go into that a little bit?
Yes, please forgive me. You might have heard the doorbell ring in the background. But I was able to kind of let them know I'm in the middle of an interview. Okay. Yeah, I just want to, I think I caught the whole question. If I'm kind of off base a little bit, please help me out. So I think you're basically asking what
I've been researching as of late is the immunity human trafficking, and how they get some of these perps, and they actually get some of them within families. A lot of times, the immunity human trafficking, it's not uncommon for them to be targeted within their own family. And you had written, I think it was a blog post that I had read about the grooming that goes on.
Oh, yes. In so many ways. In fact, I still, every day, I get struck by somebody saying or doing something that and they seem kind of, potentially there's some giveaways. They seem a little antsy about it or weird about it, or, and they know they're trying to get away with something. And, or I had somebody I dated before I realized that he was assigned, to be perpetuating these things. He literally was so sloppily, and he was not a stupid person in general, but he was literally so sloppily trying to find triggers that had been successfully programmed into me that he kept saying, I don't mean to trigger you. I don't mean to trigger you. He kept using that term, triggering like that, hoping that if he said it enough that he would trigger me. And, it's just something. And so I realized that in addition to, some of the more extreme things, they would, the sexual abuse, because that's on a physical level, and obviously violent, they would do subtle things over time. So if they can get, parents to cooperate, then they're happy to do that, because whoever is living in the same household as you, that can affect you on a day in, day out basis and not give you a chance to have your resilience kick in, and make you hard to brainwash and program again, basically. So some of the things they do is do everything they can to undermine your assertiveness. So they want to try to make you way too uncomfortable to basically say no to anybody. If anybody asks you, anything, to do anything or so, you're not supposed to be able to feel like saying no. And that's something I noticed, like I would have, because no matter how unreasonable the request and how reasonable it is for me to say no, I would actually get really verbally abused over it for a very long time. Only, once I reached adulthood and I was able to say, with more confidence and authority, that no, that's not reasonable, and just no. So that's my final answer. But they would never accept that. They were always trying to like disallow me from being able to say no to anything. So that was part of the grooming. Mm-hmm. And even with the what happened on campus, I had the person believed to be my mother, who is a government contracted neuropsychiatrist, and has worked on this type of activity, and not just with me. So I had found that there was a facility. It was a 24/7 live-in residential facility for no age minimum, and for both genders. I found all of this to be very of interest, and it was called Shine and Stars Behavior Modification Facility, and when I started, finding the information about that and sharing that and looking to, started with getting the screenshots together on it and everything, they also disappeared that from the internet. And as far as I could tell, some new facilities popped up that seem very connected with similar but different names. And so it seems to be, I was seeing things like that going on, that they're trying to, and I think I should probably explain that they're trying to be doing these things actively, which I think helps to explain why it's hard to get official responses, because we get apologies come out for non-consensual human experimentation like decades after the fact. Mm-hmm. But when they're, and so does some of the information as far as the methodologies and so forth, but when they're actively doing something in that context of, black budget funded and so forth, covert operations, they don't say anything about it, and they pretty much flash their badges and shut everybody else up about it. But it's it needs to be looked into properly, because clearly there's abuses, because I don't think anybody could have really officially agreed that sexual assaults and human trafficking and so forth can be all sanctioned and just ignored by law enforcement. So, but we're needing the public awareness to increase on this, and in order to have that done, because of these the ways that they've been able to go about it. It's not just like any local group of human traffickers or something like that. It's this internationally networked group that has been able
network that operates through a black budget.
Yeah, right, exactly. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Wow, it's a lot. It's a lot, but your report is excellent, and I'm going to be sharing it in the CPS News Network as well as the Portal to Justice. Was there anything else that you wanted to touch on?
Yes. You reminded me of something, and I think because basically, a lot of the information of like methodologies that they're using basically fall under that Project MK Ultra that was partially declassified.
Oh yes, that's what I was going to ask about, the MK Ultra, because okay, yeah, go for it. Go ahead.
Well, no, go ahead. I'm pulling up the page that gives you the summary, the public summary they have on Wikipedia. I have it pulled up now, but go ahead. What else were you thinking?
Well, a lot of what goes on in the Child Protective Services also involves a lot of the MK Ultra and the traumatizing and drugging of the children as well. But yes, please expand. Go ahead. Okay,
yes, here's the, it's 1, 2, 3, it's 4 fairly short paragraphs. I think I want to read those because now I know I try not to read too much, for interviewing kind of situation because I don't want to bore people or so. But some things like this one, I think it's important just to read it. They already did a. Now I will say it's been watered down, and the same people we're trying to get help against seem to have a good influence into what really gets released on Wikipedia and things like that. And I've seen it myself change with my own two eyes. I've documented actually too because they had taken out that it included the sexual abuse of children, and I was bringing a lot of attention to that. And currently, as of this moment, 3:26 Eastern Standard Time in the afternoon on December 5th, 2018, they have it back on there. So I'm going to, because I absolutely do not think that is a coincidence that there's this rampant epidemic through certain government facilities, so these connections need to be looked into and what they're really trying to accomplish, because I really don't think it's just random human nature is just so abusive. I really don't believe that at all. So it says here, Project MKUltra, also called the CIA Mind Control Program, is the code name given to a program of experiments on human subjects that were designed and undertaken by the United States Central Intelligence Agency and which were at times illegal. Experiments on humans were intended to identify and develop drugs and procedures to be used in interrogations in order to weaken the individual and force confessions through mind control. The project was organized through the Office of Scientific Intelligence of the CIA and coordinated with the U.S. Army Biological Warfare Laboratories. The operation, and it gives some information, I'm going to skip over that part because I think that's the most misleading of what they do have on there about the years. Because like I said, they did make a note at some point, I don't know if they still have it up there today, but that there are insiders that have been complaining that no, this is not just something in the past, this is a problem that's active and ongoing, even if potentially it was renamed or something like that. But anyway, so then it does say the program engaged in many illegal activities, including the use of United States and Canadian citizens as its unwitting test subjects, which led to controversy regarding its legitimacy. And then it says MKUltra used numerous methods to manipulate people's mental states and alter brain functions, including the surreptitious administration of drugs, especially LSD, and other chemicals, hypnosis, sensory deprivation, isolation, verbal and sexual abuse, including the sexual abuse of children, and other forms of torture. The scope of Project MKUltra was broad with research, and this is very important too. See, people don't think it could happen on such a wide scale. They already have this kind of wide scale network in place to do this, and that's why it's more of a problem here. Yeah, it's more of a problem through these types of certain environments, the military bases, the university campuses, especially if they're like government university campuses as opposed to private university campuses, etc. They could potentially be more vulnerable to this. So it says the scope of Project MKUltra was broad with research undertaken at 80 institutions, including colleges and universities, hospitals, prisons, and pharmaceutical companies. The CIA operated through these institutions using front organizations, although sometimes top officials at these institutions were aware of the CIA's involvement. So yeah, that's basically, the rest is more legal and technical and stuff. But it does reference some activity. It doesn't, I don't think it says his name outright, but see, Senator Ted Kennedy had been involved in previous inquiry into these types of activities, and he was willing to have it, take the, because you need, there's a lot of bureaucracy to have actual congressional official inquiry and stuff. So you need, from what I understand, a United States level senator, not a state level senator, federal, and same with the congressperson. So like how they brought that June 2005 human pesticide experiments report, they were able to commission that. That was a U.S. Senator, Barbara Boxer, and U.S. Congressperson, Henry Waxman. So Senator Kennedy was willing to be the U.S. Senator, and then he would have also needed, I believe he would have needed, I'm sure he would have had no trouble getting it in the relative to other. I mean, he was particularly powerful and influential and connected and liked. So, I mean, he would have had all the trouble that comes with these people, doing all the puppeting they can do to prevent this from happening. But I mean, he would have had the best chance, maybe is a better way to put it, of anybody to also get a U.S. level congressperson to go along with him, so that between the two of them, they could commission official inquiry into that and a report.
Wow, it's fascinating, and I know you're the founding spokesperson of Snowy Oak, which stands for Stop Non-Consensual Experiments on World Citizens, and I also, my friend Govinda has a initiative called Human 2020, and we are pushing to really spotlight this type of content and bring it to the forefront, to the public, so that we can end human trafficking by 2020. And I appreciate so much you coming on and sharing this content with my audience. And I want to have you back on again. Do you have a website as well?
I do. The central place, because I don't want to confuse people. I can mention them real quick, but then the central place really is the place you mentioned. There's a Facebook community page for Stop Non-Consensual Experiments on All World Citizens, and that acronym is, so it's facebook.com/SNOEOAWC, and basically I have a YouTube channel. It's Chinyere.com. So youtube.com/CHIN as in Nancy, YEREDOTCOM. And I do have, sometimes I have things that are relatively circumstantial evidence-wise. And then other times, like them actually saying these are business partners, Navy people, that's on the strongest end for, not just like suggestive, but a lot more than just suggestive. So I have the range. So the ones that are the strongest, like that one, I put them into the playlist to the attention of the United States Senate Judiciary Committee is the name of that playlist. And really I tried to get, when I filed the complaint to the FBI and when I asked for help from other government officials, I bring their attention specifically to that playlist as well, because that's the one that has like actual recordings of the organized predators speaking amongst themselves, saying some telling things and things like that. Or sometimes I actually got visuals of them too. That's a riskier thing because, in order to visually record someone, you have to be wearing a camera lens, right, that's in range that it can record them, which means you're running more risk also that they can see, they can, realize that you're doing that, and that puts the person in more danger. So it's not something I recommend, but it is something I've sometimes done. And even audio is risky also because I can't recommend that people go around trying to audio record organized criminals, but if they really are looking to do that, they have to keep in mind that that a potential issue is the sounds that even though you can hide it visually, potentially that recorder could make some sounds. It could run out of space. It could beep, tell you there's a low battery warning. It could start beeping something, There could also be, there is equipment that organized criminals it's in their arsenal to use equipment to sweep, electronic sweeping things and detecting things to see, even if they don't like pat you down physically, directly, they can have equipment that can tip them off if you have recording equipment on you and so forth. So those are risky things. Yeah. Those are risks that I decided to take, but those are, I want to make sure people, don't take it for granted because those are risky things to do. So I can't recommend doing them. It's just something I got really fed up and I decided personally to do it at some times. And then I have my website, my direct website, but when I started the site, it had nothing to do with any of this.
But
I do have a section on this.
We have a guest in the chat room. Hi, Brenda. And she said that she tried accessing your website through Google, and they said it was suspicious, and they stopped her from being able to access it.
Oh my gosh, I appreciate her letting us know that. It's not the first time I've come across somebody's let me know, or I've seen myself, like sometimes when I go to a hotel or a computer lab, especially on a campus, especially like a government university campus, it's like they're trying to prevent the students from, I find out that, from seeing the website. But no, I mean, I'm very conscientious about my content. There's nothing like X-rated. There's nothing illegal. Or I'm very careful not to violate anybody's copyright, etc. So, and it is my lastname.com. So it's Chinyere.com, CHIN as in Nancy, YERE.com. And that's why the name of my YouTube channel is also youtube.com/Chinyere.com. But then there it's spelled out, CHINYERE.com. But an easier thing might be, I centralize, like I've centralized the highlights at least through that Facebook community page for Snowy Oak, SNOEOAWC.
Okay, yeah. So you can check her out on Facebook as well, Snowy Oak, which is it stands for Stop Non-Consensual Experiments on World Citizens. Sahar, thank you so much.
Yes.
Thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, you're welcome. Oh, the only thing I want to clarify there, the only word you're missing, the all, the AAWC, all world citizens. Stop non-consensual experiments on all world citizens. Yes.
Oh, okay. All world. Oh, I see it right here. I see it. Okay, well, I have to and wrap the show up because I'm going to have little people here in about 20
Yes, I remember. That's so cute.
So you're very brave, and I so appreciate you joining me on the show today, and you're more than welcome to come back anytime.
Thank you so much. God bless you.
God bless.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right, guys. So thanks, Brenda, for joining us in the live chat room. It's always nice to see somebody there. So that was Sahar Chinyere, and she is, really bringing out some of these crimes in a very detailed way. I'm going to be posting her report to the CPS News Network as well as the Porthole to Justice, and you can check it out there. Let's see. Okay. What song do I want to close out with? Let's see. Well, this has been another episode of Porthole to Justice Off the Cuff. You can tune in and subscribe on Spreaker.com. You can also subscribe on Twitter and Facebook. I'm more active on my blog there. You can subscribe to the Social Media News Network as well as CPS News Network and the Porthole to Justice. All right, folks, this is Death Threat again, but vocals by Trish Daniel and original music by Zeth Daniel.
I told you they were following you. I told you they are after you because you tell the truth. You don't cover their lies. They are your death threat, death threat, death threat. They are your death threat, death threat, death threat. They are your death threat, death threat, death threat. But I have news for them. I will keep on saying what they do, all the lies they keep, and all the bodies they hide. They are your death threat, death threat, death threat. They are your death threat, death threat, death threat. They are evil, they are scum. They are your death threat, death threat. They are your death threat, death threat, death threat. They are your death threat, death threat, death threat. They are your death threat, death threat, death threat. One day there will be justice. day there will be peace. One day there will be another way. But for now, I have death threats. They lie about me. They cry into me. They hide from me. They see what I possess. They hide away. For now, I told you they were following you. I told you they were after you. Because you tell the truth. Because your voice is heard. You want a better world. They are your death threat, death threat, death threat. They are your death threat, death threat, death threat. They are your death threat, death threat, death threat. They are your death threat, death threat, death threat. They are your death threat, death threat, death threat. They lie about me. They pry into me. They hide from me. They seek what I possess. They slide away.